The black SUV rolled through the iron gates of the Kang estate in Alpine, New Jersey at exactly 11:47 at night. The mansion stood tall against the dark sky, its windows glowing with warm golden light. It was one of the most expensive properties in one of the wealthiest zip codes in America. Old money lived here. New power thrived here. Jai-ho Kang stepped out of the vehicle before his driver could open the door. He was tired. 3 days in Chicago dealing with a supplier who thought he could skim money from the Kang organization had drained him. The supplier was now at the bottom of Lake Michigan. Problem solved. Jai-ho adjusted his charcoal three-piece suit and walked toward the front entrance. His expensive rings caught the moonlight as he moved. Every step he took carried the weight of a man who controlled half the East Coast's underground economy. He was 34 years old, and he had already buried more enemies than most men would meet in a lifetime. The house was quiet when he entered. His staff knew better than to hover when he returned from business trips. He preferred silence. He preferred solitude. Jai-ho made his way through the grand foyer, past the cream-colored walls and classical architectural details that his mother had chosen before she died. He was heading toward his study when he heard something that made him stop. Laughter. A child's laughter. His son's laughter. Jai-ho turned slowly. The sound was coming from the kitchen. He walked toward it, his footsteps silent on the marble floor. When he reached the ornate gold-framed doorway, he gripped the frame so hard that his rings dug into his flesh. And then he saw it. His 4-year-old son, Min-jun, was standing in the kitchen covered in flour. The boy's dark hair was dusted white, and his small hands were sticky with dough. He was laughing, actually laughing, while a woman knelt beside him, wiping his fingers with a warm cloth. The woman was black. She wore the traditional maid's uniform, a black dress with a white apron and white trim. Her natural hair was pulled back neatly, and her movements were gentle, almost maternal. She was saying something to Min-jun in a soft voice, and the boy was looking at her like she was the most important person in the world. Jai-ho felt his chest tighten. Min-jun had not laughed in over a year, not since his mother walked out, not since the therapists started coming, not since Jai-ho had accepted that his son might be broken forever. But here he was, giggling like a normal child, clinging to the maid's apron like she was his lifeline. The boy looked up at her with pure adoration. He called her name with a softness Jai-ho had never heard his son use. Not for him, not for anyone. Jai-ho's jaw clenched. Something burned in his chest, confusion, anger, and underneath it all, something that felt dangerously close to jealousy. His son had never looked at him that way, not once. I welcome you, my beautiful family and friends. Please click subscribe. Do well to like this video and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more thrilling stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's continue. Jai-ho did not announce his presence immediately. He stood in the doorway for another 30 seconds, watching the scene unfold in front of him. The maid finished wiping Min-jun's hands and then cupped his small face gently. She said something that made the boy nod eagerly. Then she reached for a small piece of dough and handed it to him. Min-jun shaped it clumsily into a ball, and the woman praised him like he had created a masterpiece. Jai-ho had hired countless people to care for his son, nannies with degrees from top universities, specialists recommended by the best child psychologists in Manhattan. None of them had lasted more than a month. Min-jun rejected them all, refusing to speak, refusing to eat, refusing to exist in any meaningful way. But this woman, this maid, she had done something none of them could do. She had made his son human again. Jai-ho should have been grateful. Instead, he felt something cold wrap around his heart. He did not like mysteries. He did not like things he could not control. And he definitely did not like the way his son looked at this stranger. He cleared his throat. The woman's head snapped up. Her eyes met his, and Jai-ho saw something he rarely encountered, no fear. She did not flinch. She did not bow. She simply looked at him with a calm expression, as if he were just another person in the room rather than the most dangerous man in New Jersey. Min-jun noticed his father and immediately went quiet. The laughter disappeared. The light in his eyes dimmed. He pressed closer to the maid, gripping her apron tighter. Jai-ho noticed. He noticed everything. "Mr. Kang," the woman said, rising to her feet. Her voice was steady. "We were not expecting you back until tomorrow." Jai-ho ignored her statement. "What is happening here?" "Min-jun wanted to learn how to make beignets," she replied. "It is a recipe from my grandmother." Jai-ho's eyes moved to his son. "Min-jun, come here." The boy did not move. He stayed pressed against the maid's leg, his small fingers wrapped in the fabric of her apron. Something dark flashed across Jai-ho's face. His own son was choosing a stranger over him. "It is late," the woman said gently, sensing the tension. She knelt beside Min-jun and spoke softly. "Go say good night to your father, then we can finish our beignets tomorrow, I promise." Min-jun looked up at her, then back at Jai-ho. Slowly, reluctantly, he released her apron and walked toward his father. He stopped 2 feet away and gave a small bow. "Good night, Appa." Jai-ho stared down at his son. The boy's eyes were fixed on the floor. There was no warmth in his posture, no affection in his voice. This was duty, not love. "Good night," Jai-ho said flatly. Min-jun turned and ran back to the maid. He hugged her leg once more before she gently guided him toward the doorway. As they passed Jai-ho, the woman did not lower her gaze. She looked at him directly, just for a moment, before leading his son out of the kitchen. Jai-ho stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by flour and dough, and the fatting echo of his son's laughter. He needed answers. Jai-ho Kang had built his empire on information. He knew things about people before they knew things about themselves. So when he returned to his study that night, he pulled every file on every staff member in his household. The maid's name was Camille Fontaine. She was 28 years old, born and raised in the Treme neighborhood of New Orleans, Louisiana. She had moved to New Jersey 3 months ago after the death of her grandmother. She had no living family, no husband, no children. Her background check had been clean when she was hired. No criminal record, no suspicious connections. Just a woman with a degree in early childhood education who had never gotten to use it because life kept knocking her down. Jai-ho read the file 3 times. There was nothing there to explain why his son had bonded with her so quickly. Nothing to explain the laughter, the affection, the trust. He closed the file and poured himself a glass of whiskey. He stood at the window overlooking the garden, watching the darkness outside. 18 months ago, his wife Yuna had walked out. She left in the middle of the night without warning. She took jewelry, cash, and her passport. She did not take Min-jun. Her note was short. "I never wanted to be a mother. I cannot pretend anymore." Jai-ho had not been surprised. Yuna had always been cold, more interested in status than family. Their marriage was arranged by their fathers to unite 2 powerful families. Love was never part of the equation. But Min-jun had been devastated. At 3 years old, he did not understand why his mother left. He only understood that she was gone. He stopped speaking. He stopped eating normally. He started having nightmares that left him screaming in the dark. Jai-ho tried everything. He hired the best doctors, the best therapists, the best childcare specialists money could buy. Nothing worked. His son remained locked inside himself, a ghost of the happy toddler he used to be. And then Camille Fontaine arrived 3 months ago, and everything changed. Jai-ho finished his whiskey and set the glass down. He did not trust her. He did not trust anyone, but he also could not deny the evidence in front of his eyes. His son was healing, and this woman was the reason. The next morning, Jai-ho summoned his house manager, Mrs. Park, to his study. She was a thin Korean woman in her 60s who had worked for the Kang family for over 30 years. She knew when to speak and when to stay silent. Today, Jai-ho wanted her to speak. "Tell me everything about Camille Fontaine," he said, sitting behind his desk. "I want to know every interaction she has had with my son." Mrs. Park folded her hands in front of her. "Sir, Miss Fontaine has been exceptional. When she first arrived, she did not force herself on the young master. She simply existed near him, working in the same rooms, humming old songs, never demanding anything from him." Jai-ho leaned back in his chair. "Continue." During her second week, the young master approached her while she was cleaning the library. He just stood next to her and watched. She did not acknowledge him right away. She let him observe her. After an hour, she handed him a dust cloth and asked if he wanted to help. Mrs. Park's voice softened. He took the cloth, sir. He helped her clean for the rest of the afternoon. It was the first time he had engaged with anyone since Mrs. Kang left. Jai-ho's jaw tightened at the mention of his ex-wife. What happened after that? They started spending more time together. Miss Fontaine would read to him in the garden. She taught him simple cooking tasks in the kitchen. She started braiding his hair because he asked her to, even though his hair does not need braiding. Mrs. Park paused. Within a month, the young master was speaking again. Full sentences. He even started smiling. Jai-ho absorbed this information in silence. He did not like how much he had missed while focusing on his business empire. He did not like how a stranger had succeeded where he had failed. Why was I not informed? He asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Mrs. Park hesitated. We did send reports, sir, but you were occupied with business matters. We assumed you would prefer good news over detailed explanations. Jai-ho dismissed her with a wave of his hand. When she was gone, he pulled up the security footage from the past 3 months on his computer. He watched hours of recordings. He saw Camille reading to Min-jun in the garden, her voice animated as she acted out different characters. He saw her teaching him to knead dough in the kitchen, patient even when he made mistakes. He saw his son fall asleep in her arms on the living room couch, peaceful in a way Jai-ho had never witnessed. The footage made him feel things he did not want to feel. He saw the way Min-jun looked at Camille, with complete trust, complete adoration. The boy sought her out the moment he woke up. He cried when she left for the night. He asked about her constantly, according to Mrs. Park's notes. Jai-ho realized with a cold clarity that his son loved this woman more than he loved his own father. And he did not know how to handle that. That evening, Jai-ho made a decision. He would confront Camille directly. He would remind her of her place in this household. He would establish boundaries that should never have been crossed. He found her in the hallway outside Min-jun's bedroom. She had just finished putting the boy to sleep. When she saw Jai-ho, she stopped and waited. Miss Fontaine, Jai-ho said, blocking her path. We need to talk. Camille clasped her hands in front of her. Of course, Mr. Kang, what can I do for you? Jai-ho stepped closer, using his height and presence to intimidate her. It was a tactic that worked on everyone, business rivals, enemies, even his own men. People crumbled under his cold stare. Camille did not crumble. She held her ground. You have overstepped your boundaries, Jai-ho said, his voice like ice. You are the help, you clean, you organize. You do not bond with my son like you are his mother. Camille's expression did not change. I have never claimed to be his mother. But you act like one. You read to him, you cook with him, you let him sleep in your arms. I do my job, Mr. Kang. Part of that job includes caring for a child who needs care. Jai-ho's eyes narrowed. You are replaceable. I can have you removed from this house within the hour. For the first time, something flickered in Camille's eyes. But it was not fear. It was defiance. Then remove me, she said quietly. But before you do, ask yourself something. When was the last time your son laughed before I came here? When was the last time he spoke in full sentences? When was the last time he fell asleep peacefully without screaming from nightmares? Jai-ho did not answer. He could not. Camille took a step forward, closing the distance between them. She looked up at him without flinching. Your son needed someone to see him. I saw him. If that is a crime in this house, then fire me. But do not pretend that what I have done is wrong. She stepped around him and walked down the hallway. Her footsteps were steady, unhurried. She did not look back. Jai-ho stood frozen in place. No one had ever spoken to him like that. No one had ever challenged him so directly and walked away unscathed. He should have been furious. He should have called security and had her removed immediately. Instead, he watched her disappear around the corner, and he felt something he had not felt in years. Respect. Jai-ho did not sleep that night. He sat in his study, turning Camille's words over in his mind. She had challenged him in a way no one else dared. She had exposed a truth he did not want to face. He was failing his son. By morning, Jai-ho had made another decision. He would learn everything there was to know about Camille Fontaine. Not just the surface details in her employee file, but the deeper truths. Who was this woman who showed no fear? Where did she come from? What made her the way she was? He called his head of intelligence, a man named Vincent Rhee, and ordered a deep investigation. "I want everything," Jai-ho said. "Her childhood, her education, her relationships, any debt, any secrets, any connections she might have. Leave no stone unturned." Vincent nodded. Timeline: 48 hours. The investigation began immediately. Vincent's team dug into public records, social media archives, and even traveled to New Orleans to interview people who knew Camille. The results came back faster than expected. Camille Fontaine was born in the Treme neighborhood of New Orleans to a teenage mother who died of a drug overdose when Camille was 4 years old. She was raised by her grandmother, Delphine Fontaine, a woman who worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over their heads. Camille excelled in school despite the poverty surrounding her. She earned a scholarship to Louisiana State University and graduated with a degree in early childhood education. She dreamed of opening a daycare center for children in low-income neighborhoods. But life had other plans. During her senior year of college, her grandmother was diagnosed with heart disease. The medical bills piled up. Camille abandoned her career plans and became her grandmother's full-time caretaker. She worked odd jobs, cleaning houses, waitressing, doing whatever she could to pay for medications and doctor visits. It was not enough. 3 years ago, Delphine needed a surgery that could have saved her life. The hospital in New Orleans refused to perform it without payment up front. Insurance would not cover it. Camille tried everything: fundraisers, loans, begging. Nothing worked. Delphine Fontaine died in a rundown apartment, holding her granddaughter's hand. Jai-ho read this section of the report 3 times. He imagined Camille sitting beside her grandmother, watching the life drain from the only family she had ever known. He imagined the helplessness, the grief, the rage at a system that valued money over human life. After her grandmother's death, Camille had nothing left in New Orleans. She sold what little she owned and moved to New Jersey, where a distant acquaintance told her there was work available in wealthy households. She needed stability. She needed to survive. She did not know she was walking into the home of one of the most dangerous men in America. The report also included notes from interviews with Camille's former employers and neighbors. Every single one described her the same way: kind, hardworking, patient. One elderly woman in New Orleans said that Camille had visited her every week to check on her, even when she had nothing to gain from doing so. "That girl has a heart of gold," the woman said. "The world has not been kind to her, but she stays kind anyway. That takes strength." Jai-ho closed the report and stared at the wall. He had expected to find something suspicious: a hidden agenda, a criminal connection, a reason to justify removing her from his home. Instead, he found a woman who had suffered tremendous loss and still chose to show love to a broken little boy. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. Jai-ho was alone in his study, surrounded by darkness. He thought about Camille holding Minjun's hand. He thought about her holding her grandmother's hand as the woman took her last breath. He told himself he did not care. He told himself it changed nothing. But he could not stop thinking about her. A week passed, and Jai-ho found himself watching Camille more than he should. He did not approach her. He did not speak to her beyond basic formalities, but he was aware of her presence in a way that unsettled him. He noticed how she hummed old jazz songs while she worked. He noticed how she always kept her composure, even when other staff members rushed around in chaos. He noticed how she treated everyone with the same respect, whether they were the head of the household or the newest kitchen worker. But Jai-ho did not have time to dwell on these observations. Business demanded his attention. The Yoon syndicate from Los Angeles was making aggressive moves. They had been trying to expand to the East Coast for years, but Jai-ho's organization had always blocked them. Now, they were getting bolder. On a Tuesday night, armed men attacked one of Jai-ho's warehouses in Newark. They killed 2 guards and hospitalized 3 others. They stole a shipment worth over $2 million. Worse, they left a message spray-painted on the warehouse wall. The KANGSRGTTING soft. Jai-ho received the call at midnight. He went into war mode immediately. For the next 2 weeks, he was barely home. He spent his days in meetings with his lieutenants, planning retaliation. He spent his nights on the streets, visiting his operations, reminding everyone that the Kang Empire was still strong. When he did return to the mansion, it was usually after 2 in the morning. He expected the house to be dark and silent. But something strange kept happening. Every night, no matter how late Jai-ho returned, Min-jun was awake. The boy sat on the bottom step of the grand staircase, wrapped in a blanket, fighting sleep, and beside him always was Camille. When Jai-ho walked through the door, Min-jun would run to him and wrap his small arms around his father's leg. The hug lasted only a few seconds, but it was more physical affection than the boy had shown Jai-ho in over a year. Then Min-jun would return to Camille, take her hand, and let her lead him back upstairs to bed. This happened 6 nights in a row. On the 7th night, Jai-ho stopped Camille before she could leave. "Why do you do this?" he asked, his voice low. Camille turned to face him. Her eyes were tired. Of course they were. She had been staying up until the early hours of the morning every night, but her gaze was steady. "Do what, Mr. Kang?" "Keep him awake to see me. Make sure he is here when I come home." Camille was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "A boy should know his father comes home. Even if his father does not know how to show love, the boy should still feel safe." Jai-ho stared at her. He wanted to say something, to defend himself, to explain that he did love his son, that he just did not know how to express it. But the words would not come. Camille turned and walked up the stairs, her footsteps soft in the quiet house. Jai-ho stood alone in the foyer, her words echoing in his head. Even if his father does not know how to show love. Was that how she saw him? Cold and distant, unable to love his own child. The worst part was that she might be right. The war with the Yoon syndicate continued, but Jai-ho found his thoughts drifting more and more to the woman in his house. He started finding reasons to be home earlier. He told himself it was to spend time with Min-jun, and that was partially true. But he also wanted to see Camille. He wanted to watch her interact with his son. He wanted to hear her voice, her laughter, her gentle corrections when Min-jun misbehaved. He wanted to understand how she had become such an important part of his household in such a short time. One evening, Jai-ho came home at 8 o'clock instead of his usual 2 in the morning. The house was still alive, lights on, sounds of activity from the kitchen. He followed the sounds and found Camille and Min-jun making dinner together. They were preparing jambalaya, another recipe from Camille's grandmother. Min-jun was stirring a pot with intense concentration while Camille supervised, offering encouragement. Jai-ho leaned against the doorframe and watched. Min-jun did not notice him, too focused on his task. "Good job, little man," Camille said, ruffling his hair. "Your grandma Delphine would be proud." Min-jun beamed. "Can Appa eat with us tonight?" Camille glanced toward the doorway and saw Jai-ho standing there. For a moment, their eyes met. Something passed between them, an understanding, a silent negotiation. "I think that is up to your father," Camille said carefully. Min-jun turned and spotted Jai-ho. His face lit up in a way that made Jai-ho's chest ache. "Appa, you are home early. Come eat with us." Jai-ho hesitated. He had not shared a casual family meal in years. His life was business dinners, formal meetings, eating alone in his study while reviewing reports. But his son was looking at him with such hope, and Camille was watching him with an expression that seemed to ask, "Are you going to disappoint him?" "All right," Jai-ho said quietly. "I will eat with you." Min-jun cheered and went back to stirring. Camille's lips curved into the smallest smile, the first smile she had ever given Jai-ho. That dinner changed something between them. They sat at the kitchen island instead of the formal dining room. The jambalaya was spicy and rich, flavors that Jai-ho had never experienced before. Min-jun talked constantly, telling his father about everything he had learned from Camille, recipes, stories about New Orleans, songs she had taught him. Jai-ho listened. He actually listened, without checking his phone, without thinking about business. He watched his son come alive, and he felt something warm bloom in his chest. After dinner, Minjun insisted that Camille teach Jaiho the second line dance. She laughed and tried to refuse, but the boy would not take no for an answer. So there they were, in the kitchen of a mafia mansion in Alpine, New Jersey. A Korean crime boss, a black maid, and a little boy, doing a clumsy version of a New Orleans dance while Minjun clapped and cheered. Jaiho could not remember the last time he had laughed, but that night he laughed. The shift continued over the following weeks. Jaiho started coming home earlier more often. He joined Camille and Minjun for dinner 3 or 4 times a week. He learned about her grandmother, her childhood in Tremé, her dreams of opening a daycare center. In return, he told her things he had never told anyone. He told her about his mother, who died when he was 19, who used to sing Korean lullabies to him when he was a child. He told her about the pressure of inheriting his father's empire, the loneliness of being feared by everyone around him. Camille listened without judgment. She did not try to fix him or change him. She simply heard him. One night after Minjun was asleep, Jaiho and Camille sat on the back patio, looking out at the garden. The air was cool, and the stars were bright above them. "Why did you not leave?" Jaiho asked suddenly. Camille looked at him. "What do you mean?" "After I confronted you that first night, after I threatened to fire you, most people would have quit. Why did you stay?" Camille was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Because of Minjun. He needed someone, and I could not walk away from a child who needed me. I know what it feels like to be alone, to have no one. I could not do that to him." Jaiho absorbed her words. Then he asked more quietly, "Was it only for Minjun? Is that the only reason you stayed?" Camille met his eyes. The air between them felt charged, heavy with unspoken things. "At first," she admitted, "but not anymore." Jaiho reached over and took her hand. It was impulsive, unplanned, completely unlike him. But when her fingers intertwined with his, it felt right. They sat there in silence, holding hands, watching the stars. Neither of them acknowledged what was happening. Neither of them put words to it, but they both knew. Everything had changed. Jaiho's right-hand man was named Dorian Cho. He had been with Jaiho for 12 years, since they were both young men proving themselves in the organization. Jaiho trusted him with his life, his secrets, his son's safety. But Dorian harbored resentment that had been growing for years. He had been passed over for promotions. He had watched Jaiho take credit for operations Dorian had planned. He had stood in the shadows while Jaiho lived in the spotlight. The money was good, but money was not enough. Dorian wanted power. Dorian wanted respect. And he had found allies, willing to give him both. For 6 months, Dorian had been secretly feeding information to the Yoon syndicate. He told them about shipments, about security weaknesses, about Jaiho's movements. The warehouse attack in Newark, Dorian had provided the blueprints. Now, Dorian saw an opportunity for something even bigger. He had been watching Jaiho closely. He noticed the changes, the earlier arrivals home, the dinner with the maid. The softening in Jaiho's, usually cold demeanor. He did surveillance of his own and discovered the truth. Jaiho Kang, the feared mafia boss, was falling for the help. Dorian brought this information to the Yoon family. He proposed a plan: kidnap the maid, use her as bait to lure Jaiho into a trap, kill him, take over the Kang Empire with Yoon backing. The Yoons agreed immediately. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Jaiho was in Manhattan, meeting with a lawyer about legitimate business investments. Mrs. Park had the day off. Most of the security staff were positioned at the front gate and the perimeter. No one expected an attack from within. Dorian let the Yoon men into the house through a service entrance. There were 6 of them, armed and masked. Camille was in the kitchen with Minjun, teaching him to make pralines. They were laughing about something. Minjun had gotten sugar in his hair again when the door burst open. The men swarmed in like locusts. Camille's first instinct was to protect Minjun. She pulled him behind her, shielding him with her body. "Run," she screamed at him. "Run and hide." But one of the men grabbed Minjun before he could move. The boy screamed, thrashing and kicking. "Let him go." Camille lunged at the man, scratching his face, trying to free the child. Another man struck her across the face. She fell hard, her head hitting the marble counter. Blood trickled from a cut above her eye. "Stop," Minjun screamed. "Do not hurt her, stop." The man holding Minjun shoved the boy to the ground. "We are not here for you, kid, just the woman." They grabbed Camille and dragged her toward the door. She fought with everything she had, biting, scratching, kicking. She managed to break free for a moment and ran toward Minjun. "Tell your father," she said urgently, cupping the boy's tear-streaked face. "Tell him I am sorry. Tell him to find me. Tell him." A man grabbed her from behind and clamped a hand over her mouth. They dragged her out of the kitchen, out of the house, into a waiting van. The last thing Minjun saw was Camille's eyes, wide with fear but also with determination, as the van doors slammed shut. Then she was gone. Minjun sat alone on the cold kitchen floor, surrounded by spilled sugar and broken glass. He screamed for help until his voice went raw. Jai-ho received the call 20 minutes later. He was in the middle of signing documents when his phone rang. It was the head of his household security, his voice trembling. "Sir, there has been an incident." Jai-ho's blood went cold. "Minjun." "He is safe, sir, shaken but unharmed, but Miss Fontaine." Jai-ho did not hear the rest. He was already running. He made the drive from Manhattan to Alpine in record time, ignoring every traffic law, nearly causing 3 accidents. When he burst through the front door of the mansion, he found Minjun wrapped in a blanket on the couch, being watched by 2 terrified maids. The boy looked up and saw his father, his face crumpled. "Appa." Jai-ho crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled his son into his arms. Minjun sobbed against his chest, his small body shaking. "They took her," the boy cried. "They took Camille. I tried to stop them. I tried, but they were too big. I tried, Appa, I tried." Jai-ho held his son tighter. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his temples. "What did she say?" he asked, his voice rough. "Did she say anything before they took her?" Minjun looked up at him with tear-filled eyes. She said to tell you she is sorry. She said, tell him to find me." Jai-ho closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were filled with something dangerous. Rage. Pure, unfiltered rage. He stood up and called his men together. Within an hour, the Kang organization mobilized for war. Teams flooded the streets of Newark, Jersey City, and Hoboken. Jai-ho put a bounty on information, $1 million for anyone who could tell him where Camille was being held. He interrogated every contact, every informant, every person who might know something. By midnight, he had a name. Dorian Cho. Jai-ho found Dorian hiding in a rundown motel in Elizabeth, New Jersey. His former right-hand man was packing a bag, preparing to flee the country. Jai-ho kicked down the door himself. He did not bring backup. He wanted to handle this personally. Dorian spun around, gun in hand, but Jai-ho was faster. He disarmed Dorian with a brutal twist that broke 2 fingers, then slammed him against the wall. "Where is she?" Jai-ho growled. Dorian laughed despite the pain. "Look at you, the great Jai-ho Kang losing his mind over a maid, a nobody, a woman who does not even belong in your world." Jai-ho's fist connected with Dorian's face. Blood sprayed across the wall. "Where is she?" Dorian spat blood onto the floor. "She is with the Yoons, Camden, the old Fisher factory by the river, but you are too late. By the time you get there, they will be ready for you. It is a trap, you fool. You walk in there and you die." Jai-ho leaned close, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Then I will die killing every single one of them." He stepped back and looked at the man he had trusted for 12 years. The man who had betrayed him, who had put Camille in danger, who had made his son watch as the woman he loved was dragged away screaming. "You said she does not belong in my world," Jai-ho said quietly. "You are wrong. She belongs wherever she wants to belong." He pulled his gun. "And you belong in the ground." The gunshot echoed through the empty motel. The Fisher factory in Camden had been abandoned for 15 years. It sat by the Delaware River, a hulking skeleton of rusted metal and broken windows. The Yoons had turned it into a temporary base of operations. They were expecting Jaiho. They had set up positions on every floor, armed men, waiting to cut him down the moment he walked through the door. But Jaiho did not walk through the door. He coordinated a three-point assault. His best men hit the factory from the north, south, and east simultaneously. Explosions lit up the night sky. Gunfire erupted from every direction. While the Yoons scrambled to respond to the chaos, Jaiho slipped in through the basement, a service entrance that Dorian had not known about. He moved through the dark corridors like a ghost. Any man who crossed his path did not live long enough to raise an alarm. Jaiho was not just a businessman tonight. He was the monster his enemies had always feared. He found Camille on the third floor in a room that used to be an office. She was tied to a chair, her face bruised, her lips split. But she was alive. She was conscious. And when she saw Jaiho in the doorway, she did not cry. She did not beg. She just said, "What took you so long?" Despite everything, Jaiho almost smiled. He crossed the room and cut the ropes binding her wrists. His hands were gentle, a stark contrast to the violence he had just unleashed. "Can you walk?" he asked. "I can run if I have to." He helped her to her feet. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Her face was battered. His suit was stained with blood that was not his own. "You came for me," she whispered. "I will always come for you." They made their way toward the exit, but they were not alone. The head of the Yoon syndicate, a man named James Yoon, blocked their path. He was flanked by 4 armed men. "Jaiho Kang," Yoon said, his voice dripping with contempt. "I expected more from you, all this destruction over a maid." Jaiho positioned himself in front of Camille, shielding her. "She is more than you will ever understand." Yoon laughed. "How touching, kill him." The men raised their weapons. Jaiho moved faster than should have been possible. He disarmed the first man and used him as a shield against the second. The third and fourth fell to Jaiho's precise shots before they could react. That left Yoon alone. The syndicate head reached for his gun, but Jaiho was already on him. He slammed Yoon against the wall, his forearm pressed against the man's throat. "You touched something that belongs to me," Jaiho said, his voice deadly calm. "You made a child watch as your men took the woman he loves. You thought you could use her against me." Yoon gasped for air. "We can make a deal. Money, territory, whatever you want." Jaiho shook his head. "You have nothing I want." He finished it quickly, mercifully, more mercy than Yoon deserved. Then he took Camille's hand and led her out of the factory. In the car on the way back to Alpine, Camille sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window. Her hands were shaking. The adrenaline was fatting, and reality was setting in. Jaiho reached over and took her hand. It was the same thing he had done that night on the patio, under the stars. But now it meant something more. "I thought I was going to die," Camille said quietly. "I thought I would never see Minjun again. Never see." She trailed off, but Jaiho understood. "I would have burned the world down to find you," he said. "I would have destroyed everything, my empire, my reputation, my life. Nothing matters if you are not safe." Camille finally looked at him. Tears were streaming down her face. "Why?" she asked. "I am just a maid. I am nobody in your world." Jaiho pulled the car over to the side of the road. He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "You are not nobody," he said firmly. "You saved my son. You showed him what love looks like. You showed me what love looks like. I have spent my entire life building an empire of fear, and you walked in and made me feel something I thought I was incapable of feeling." He lifted one hand and gently wiped the tears from her cheek. "I love you, Camille. I do not know when it happened or how, but I love you. And if you will let me, I will spend the rest of my life proving it." Camille's breath caught. For a long moment, she did not speak. Then she leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft and tentative at first, then deeper, more urgent, a release of all the fear and tension and unspoken longing that had been building between them. When they finally pulled apart, Camille rested her forehead against his. "Take me home," she whispered. "Take me back to our son." Jaiho started the car and drove into the night. 6 months later, the Kang mansion in Alpine looked different. Not physically, the architecture was the same, the furniture unchanged, but the atmosphere had transformed completely. Laughter echoed through the hallways. Music played in the kitchen. The cold silence that had once defined the household was replaced by warmth and life. It was a Saturday afternoon, and Min-jun was running through the garden, chasing butterflies with his toy net. He was almost 5 now, taller than he had been 6 months ago, healthier, happier than Jai-ho had ever seen him. Camille, Camille, I caught one, the boy shouted. Camille stepped onto the patio, shading her eyes from the sun. Her natural hair was loose around her shoulders, and she wore a flowing summer dress instead of her old maid's uniform. Let me see, little man, she called back. She walked down to meet him, but she moved slower than she used to. Her hand rested gently on her stomach, which was now visibly rounded. 12 weeks pregnant. Min-jun showed her his empty net. It flew away. Then you will catch another one. You are getting better every day. The boy beamed and ran off to continue his hunt. Jai-ho watched from the doorway of the mansion. It was the same doorway where he had first seen Camille with his son, where his world had started to shift. But now his expression was not shock or displeasure. It was peace, it was joy, it was love. He walked across the lawn to join Camille on the patio. When he reached her, he wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his hands gently on her belly. How are you feeling? He asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. Tired, she admitted, but happy, so happy. They stood together, watching Min-jun dart around the garden. I never thought I could have this, Jai-ho said quietly. A family, a real family. I thought I was too broken, too damaged. Camille turned in his arms to face him. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing his jaw. You were never broken, she said. You just needed someone stubborn enough to show you how to love. Jai-ho smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes. And stubborn you are. I learned from my grandmother. She always said, Fontaine women do not quit, we fight for what matters. She sounds like she was a remarkable woman. She would have loved you. Camille paused. Well, after giving you a hard time first. Jai-ho laughed. I have no doubt. That evening, the kitchen was full of chaos. Camille was teaching Min-jun how to make gumbo, the same recipe her grandmother had taught her decades ago in New Orleans. The air smelled of spices and rue, and steam rose from the pot on the stove. Jai-ho sat at the kitchen island, watching them work. He was supposed to be reviewing business documents, but his laptop had gone dark from inactivity. Appa, I am stirring, Min-jun announced proudly. Camille says I am the best stirrer in the whole world. I did say that, Camille confirmed, winking at Jai-ho. Then it must be true, Jai-ho said solemnly. Camille does not lie. Min-jun puffed up with pride and focused on his task with renewed determination. Later, after dinner, the three of them sat on the living room floor, playing a board game that Min-jun had chosen. The fire crackled in the fireplace. Outside, snow was beginning to fall. Jai-ho looked at Camille across the game board. She was explaining the rules to Min-jun for the 3rd time, patient as always. The firelight caught the highlights in her hair. She was so beautiful it made his chest ache. She glanced up and caught him staring. What? Nothing, he said. I love you. Camille's face softened. I love you too. And I love both of you, Min-jun announced, throwing his arms around both of them. They collapsed into a group hug, laughing, the game forgotten. Later that night, after Min-jun was asleep, Jai-ho and Camille sat together on the patio. The snow had stopped, and the world was covered in a blanket of white. I have something for you, Jai-ho said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. When he opened it, a ring sparkled in the moonlight, an emerald surrounded by diamonds, set in platinum. The emerald reminded me of New Orleans, he said. Of where you come from, of the woman who raised you to be so strong and kind. I want you to carry a piece of home with you always. Camille stared at the ring, tears welling in her eyes. Jai-ho, I know I have a dark past, he said. I know my life is complicated and dangerous, but I am trying to change. I am stepping back from the more violent parts of the business. I want to build something legitimate, something I can pass down to our children without shame." He took her hand. "Camille Fontaine, you walked into my home as a maid and became the queen of everything I am. You saved my son. You saved me. I do not deserve you, but I will spend every day trying to be worthy of your love." He slipped the ring onto her finger. "Will you marry me?" Camille looked at the ring, then at Jai-ho, then back at the ring. The tears spilled over, streaming down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." Jai-ho pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply. Around them, the snow began to fall again, gentle and soft. 1 year later, they were married in a private ceremony in the mansion's garden. Min-jun served as the ring bearer, beaming proudly. Camille wore a white gown that flowed like water, and she carried a bouquet of magnolias shipped in from Louisiana. Jai-ho's vows were simple. "You taught me that love is not a weakness. It is the greatest strength I have ever known. I promise to protect you, to cherish you, and to remind you every single day that you are loved." Camille's vows were just as sincere. "You gave me a family when I thought I had lost everything. You gave me a home, a partner, and a son. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, to be your peace in the chaos, and to love you with everything I have." They exchanged rings, and when Jai-ho kissed his bride, Min-jun cheered louder than anyone. 3 months after the wedding, Camille gave birth to a baby girl. They named her Delphine, after Camille's grandmother. The first time Min-jun held his baby sister, he looked at her with the same wonder he had once reserved for Camille. "I will protect her," he said solemnly. "I will be the best big brother in the whole world." Jai-ho put his arm around Camille as they watched their children together. "Look at what we built," she said softly. Jai-ho kissed the top of her head. "Look at what you built. You walked into this cold, empty house and filled it with love. You showed a broken man how to be whole." Camille leaned against him, watching Min-jun carefully rock his baby sister. "It took both of us," she said. "You had to be willing to let the walls down. You gave me a reason to." They stood together in the warm glow of the nursery, a family forged from pain and loss, and the stubborn refusal to give up on love. Jai-ho Kang had spent his life building an empire of fear. He had been powerful, wealthy, untouchable, but he had also been alone, unloved, disconnected from anything that truly mattered. Then Camille Fontaine walked through his door, a maid from New Orleans with a heart of gold and the strength of a lion. She did not fear him. She did not bow to him. She saw through his walls and loved the broken man inside. She gave him a son who laughed again. She gave him a daughter who carried her grandmother's name. She gave him a home filled with music and cooking and the simple joy of family dinners. And in the end, that was worth more than all the power in the world. The Korean Mafia boss who had shocked to see his son with the black maid had become a husband, a father, and a man who finally understood what mattered. Love. Family. Home. Thank you for watching to the end. Please remember to click the subscribe button and make sure you like this video, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Thank you.